Born in Wilmington, Delaware, and growing up in Newcastle, Delaware, the life of Sergeant Murphy began. As a child, his father worked as a policeman and his mother stayed at home. His mother's name was Olga Murphy and his father's name was Hugh Vincent Murphy. His great-grandmother and his great-grandfather on his mother's side had escaped Ukraine and raised Sergeant Murphy's mother in the United States. While he was a child, he had a brother who unfortunately passed away later in his life due to heart complications. His brother was in the Air Guard and also worked as a fireman. As a child, he lived with his mother and her sisters after his parents had gotten divorced. While he lived with his mother and her sisters, they spoke in Ukrainian when they didn't want him to know something. When he was at St. Peter's High School, he worked as a bookkeeper and did many other types of jobs for Howard Johnson's. During this time, there was a draft happening because of the Vietnam War, so this heavily influenced the decision that Sergeant Murphy would make, which would be to go into the Air Force. Although this situation was not ideal, he was supported by his family to go into the Air Force. The reason that he went into the Air Force is because he thought that if he was on the front lines of the Vietnam War as a soldier in the Army, he would surely die. He also didn't want to be on a boat for a long period of time, so he thought that the Air Force was his best option at that time. He also said that at that time, if you were 18 or older, you were going into the military regardless of your duties. After he graduated high school, he was accepted into the Air Force. After enlisting into the Air Force, he went to Lackland Air Force Base for basic training. He explains where he enters his service.
Place I entered into the service. At Fort Dix, they put me on an airplane and sent me to Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, for basic training.
Lackland Air Force Base is located in Texas and has very hot weather, so you can imagine the people at basic training and how the weather affected them. One time when Sergeant Murphy was in the Air Force, he had passed out because of the heat on his way to the firing range. This was a very stressful time for the U.S., and even though he and his family were unsure of whether this was the right decision, his family supported him in going into the Air Force, because if he did not, he probably would have been drafted later. At the time of his service, there was one major conflict, which was the Vietnam War. This had a major influence on Sergeant Murphy's life because he didn't want to take the risk of dying on the front lines by being in the Army since people were getting drafted, so he enlisted into the Air Force and became a nuclear weapons specialist. He had become a nuclear weapons specialist by taking many different types of tests and meeting the requirements to become a nuclear weapons specialist. After his basic training, he went to his first Air Force base, which was in Bitburg, Germany. At this Air Force base, he took a nuclear weapons training course, which was about a year long. In Sergeant Murphy's
Since he had a lot of knowledge on all of these top-secret schematics of weapons for the United States, they did not send him on the front lines because of the information that he had. Sergeant Murphy explained what the average day of going to school was like.
After we were done with the chemistry and the electronics, it was kind of a weird school. You had a security badge, and you had to go through a double fenced yard. You traded your badge for another badge once you got into the school grounds. When you got into the school, you were searched. You got into the classroom, and let's see, they would take a book out of a safe, and they would count the pages of the book, and they would give you the book, and then we'd have to sit there for 2 or 3 hours and try to remember what we're looking at. Afterwards, we would, the proctor in the classroom, they would count the pages of the book and put it back in the safe. We would be searched again, open your ballpoint pen, see if you stuck anything in there. Then go out the double fences, trade badges, and then you were free for the day.
One time, there was a false alarm that went off, and Sergeant Murphy had to go and check it out. And as he went onto the top of the missile to check it out, he saw that it was a false alarm. Because he had been told that it was not a drill, he was scared. And after he found out that the threat was not real, he went down from the missile and started to shake because of the fear and stress that he was under at that moment. Sergeant Murphy had many different experiences involving dogs while he was in the Air Force. A lot of these experiences were not pleasant. Like right before you left.
Well, it was getting time to leave, so they wanted me to re-up. I was offered officers candidate school with an electrical engineering degree in Purdue. About a month before I was to get out, I was out with the other special. It took two specialists to open a silo, and I went out to the silo, and we had to enter a code to unlock the door. The procedure was the two nuclear weapons guys would open the door, go in, secure the warhead, and then the maintenance crews would come in to the bay. And this particular day, the codes wouldn't open the door, and all of a sudden we had all these air police surrounding us with M16s and dogs, and they threw us on the ground, face down in the snow, and I remember the dogs trying to bite my face, and them cocking the guns at our heads, and I tried to say, listen, you see us every day, let's straighten this out, and he says, if you say another word, I'm going to shoot you. So we waited till it got cleared up, went back to the base, and I went into the office and said, I'm not re-upping. I'm getting out of here. So that's when I got out of the service.
A little bit before this experience happened with the dog in Bitburg, he was offered an electrical engineering degree in Purdue. He got this opportunity because they wanted him to rejoin the Air Force, but he ended up not taking this opportunity. Sergeant Murphy recalled going to Florida with a group of the crew members that were nuclear weapons specialists, and the purpose of this trip was to take a bomb-armed missile and try to shoot down a mace missile as target practice. Unfortunately, they were never able to launch the mace missile, so their major took them fishing and then went back to their base. Cheyenne Mountain is where the United States Air Force controls the Continental ballistic missiles. Sergeant Murphy got his orders to change the missiles depending on the barometric pressure from the weather changes from Cheyenne Mountain. According to Sergeant Murphy, these missile silos were programmed into the system from Cheyenne Mountain and were fired from there as well. Sergeant Murphy had many fun experiences while he was in the service, including a trip to Rome with Gilbert Merriman.
Not often, but I would go. Gil and I would go. Gil reminded me one time we went to Rome, and we told the base that we were going on a retreat, and so we went to Rome. And while they were doing Rome, Gil and I did our own Rome tour, and he said, we walked into St. Peter's Square and St. Peter's Cathedral. And I didn't remember this. I did after he told me. But he says, we walked in to St. Peter's and there wasn't a living soul there. And I was walking around in this hallway and I found a big wooden door. So it was open. So he and I went in that door, we went up all these steps, and if you look at the dome at St. Peter's, you'll see all these statues all the way around it. The door opened up there, and he and I walked all the way around the dome looking at all the statues. Never saw a person. And we went back down and we said, you know what, we better get out of here. So the next time I went to Italy, it was tour buses and 1,000,000 people, and you could never do that now.
Yeah.
That was neat.
That's pretty cool.
For one of his extracurricular activities on base, Sergeant Murphy joined the chorus.
Well, you were trapped on the base. One guy I went to school with, Jerry Brenner, we found out that if you joined the base Air Force chorus, you could get a Class A pass. So, not that we were interested in the chorus, but we tried out and they put us in the chorus. And that way we moved out of the barracks and we got a barracks with our own room. And we got a Class A pass so we could get off base. Getting off base in Denver could be very nice.
At the end of Sergeant Murphy's service, he was inspected and then left the Air Force after serving for 4 years as a nuclear weapons specialist. He achieved the rank of sergeant and earned the National Defense Award, Air Force Outstanding Unit Award, and Air Force Good Conduct Medal. After Sergeant Murphy's service was over, he got many advanced degrees and later got a job at the USDA and worked there until retirement. As Sergeant Murphy's final message to the people who will read this in the future, he hopes that they still respect and are proud of their country. Thank you to Sergeant Vincent Murphy for his military service and his contributions to our country.